I have checked, analyzed, and read tons of papers, all the most important papers of natural law, and there are about 70 now papers related to Ubuntu. So we will see which kind of relationship could exist both. And why Ubuntu? Because it's the most shared philosophy in Africa now, at least from the legal point of view. So let me remember some of the things that we have said yesterday with one class, and we will see tomorrow with the other class. Ubuntu. Probably you will remember something about Ubuntu, no? At least you will remember this phrase, I am because we are. It's a sense of humanity. You know that. I'm not telling you nothing new. Related to, the community. A communitarian point of view of the human being. So this is interesting because how it began, according, well, we don't know very well. We have some archaeological evidence of the tribes, and also when that phrase was, at least we know. So, yeah, so not yourself. It seems to be that that phrase began in the Bantu tribes in the south. So in the Zulu tribe, especially, so let's take a closer look of the tribes and the places. And you have a kind of the origin of this kind of Bantu. No? You have both here. So at the very beginning, it were expanded like this. And at one point, well, they reached the south. This is the second one, the Xhosa, no? The Zulu and the Xhosa. Both will share this phrase at the beginning. Some people say 2 centuries ago, most of the people. Others 3 centuries ago, 3 centuries ago. So that is more or less the origin of this. So please mute yourself. No? After that is interesting. From the center of the part of the south of the continent, it was expanded to many places, reaching Africa and Central Africa, Kenya, also here, as you know. No? And that's why you have in Kenya some tribes that are related to the Bantu languages. There are about more than 500 languages and dialects in Bantu that almost all of them share more or less the same cosmovision. So in different language, it is, no? In Shona, we know that it began here, more or less here, and Zulu, we have these translations. More or less is the same. I will say, although it is from the Bantu tribes, it is present more or less the idea in many other places in Africa. It's not just Zulu. I mean, it is more or less the communitarian approach to everything. And it's more or less the same. A person is a person through other people. A person is a person through other people. But more or less is the same, with a bit of difference. A person through other people. No? I am because you are. As I told you in some lecture, for me, this is deeper than the social contract, no? Of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, because they say no. At the beginning, one guy was isolated and was, or good or bad, it doesn't matter, no? But there was a chaos when he entered in society, and according to some of them, because everyone wanted property, and property in society will destroy everything, no? And that's why even Jean Rousseau will say it will be alienated in society. So precisely the contrary is this approach, no? You exist in your community and you make no sense at all without your community. The community is part of you and you coexist with your community. So for me, it's deeper. That was stressed, by the way, by many other philosophers today. Paul Ricoeur is one of them. Person is relation. Then also Benedict XVI, he said the person is relation. Yeah, and that's why if you're Christian, you believe that in Trinity there are three persons, three relations. That is interesting. That is the model of what is the person. Another philosopher that wrote extensively about the notion of person as coexistence with others is Leonardo Polo. I follow so much Leonardo Polo. But what is interesting that they are from which century? No, the last century, and this is wisdom that appeared 2-3 centuries ago. So this is before. They have the merit, these tribes, to be so deep for me, that is deeper than the social contract. And I will say even deeper than Aristotle. Aristotle and the polis. The polis is more like a human creation. Yeah, you cannot live without the polis. You need the polis to survive, but you know you are not the polis. This is different, no? Instead, these other philosophers and this philosophy, this is you are, so it's deeper. Well, I can talk about these too many things. I wrote an article. I will share with you this article, although it is still not published, but yeah, with all the numbers. So, and then what is interesting is that I told you, I did research about what was written, all the articles that were published about Ubuntu, not on African philosophy because it could be too much, but about Ubuntu. At that moment, I did 2 studies, 1 year ago and now. So 1 year ago, there were 54 articles. Now are 70 articles. I will publish the thing that I found 1 year ago, and although this is updated, and I will give you the updates. So that is interesting because I found that they found many obviously words, no? But the most cited words the words with more repetitions or occurrences were 100 in these articles. And the most important one there, the first one, as you can see, the biggest one is Africa. The second, South. Then law, obviously. Sorry, the second one is Ubuntu, law. The third one is South, and many other things. So you can see that this is an approach to philosophy from the point of view, the perspective of the South, South Africa, no? That is interesting. Or the South of the world could be also. They use the word for both things. And well, Ubuntu, of course, there are many things we will see. We see, for example, who are the most cited authors. 2, Metz, Tadeusz Metz is my friend. He's living in South Africa and is the most cited in probably at all in Africa, or one of the most cited. Yeah, he developed these ideas. And Mokoro, she was a Nobel Prize and promoted so much Ubuntu in the South. And she was the responsible that at one point in one constitution of South Africa, they included even into the constitution this word. That is interesting. So these are the two most cited authors, as you can see. We will see many other things here. But for now, you should know what is this set of words about. Are the most repeated words in the literature about Ubuntu. Okay, I can give you the numbers. Perhaps I will show you 2-3 things of the essay, but for now, just take a look of that because we will see many of them. No, what kind of things are you talking about? No, this is interesting. Let me see what kind of words we pronounced yesterday. Dignity. Do you remember with Charles Kanjama? You will see dignities here, no? Rights. You talk about rights terms, no? Human is also person. That is interesting. People, society, individuals. Individuals also is very important. So I will say that even more than in natural law, you talk about these kind of things. Courts is a very courts-based. Well, okay. I think that another thing that we will see later, the restorative approach. Where is it? Where it was? I saw that. Well, I can find now. Criminal victim offender reconciliation, restorative, transformative. These three things are important at the bottom. Okay, so we will go back to this, but I want just to show you something. No? This is obviously the approach of the South. As a first, Africa, second, Ubuntu, third, laws, and fourth, most repeated word, South. Yeah, so that seats represent the whole Africa. Well, at least a great part of Africa, yes, but there are many other parts, as you know, no? Probably it can be Central, East, and South Africa, the Bantu tribes. Yeah, this is a good representation. However, not everything. Africa is also the North and the West, as you know, no? So what we have there, that is interesting. We have a very old tradition that began here with this guy. You know who is this guy? Probably no, and could be many. But no, this is status from one specific guy. That is interesting to know who is. So he is Tahopek. Let me pronounce better. Tahotep, or something like that. He's from Egypt. You can imagine. From Egypt, this guy. He was a kind of minister. Vizier means minister. And that he was minister 4,000 years ago in Egypt. Very well, good position, no? The minister of the empire, one of the most powerful empires, perhaps the most important empire at that time in the world, Egypt. And he wrote incredible things with a lot of wisdom. Can you read that? That is wisdom. I don't know if you can read that. Someone help me. I will appreciate. So he wrote a kind of maxims, a thing that you should follow to have a good life. And what is about? These two things, by the way, the status from here, and the text is from him, or at least probably could be a copy. No? So it's original, both things that you are watching. So in this text, we have many interesting ideas. For example, great is the law. That is why we are studying law. We believe that great is the law. Injustice exists in abundance, but evil can never succeed in the long run. So there is an idea, well, yeah, justice is not forever, has its limits. Yeah, what some ideas, no? The human race never accomplished anything. It's what God commands what gets done. Well, so now we have an idea that there is another law, that a command that is from God, that is not from the human being. So we have, even without the existence of the name of natural law, some belief 4,000 years ago in Africa, in the north of Africa, that says, no, there are two laws. There are two laws, and the one that will prevail here is in the long run, is the just law, the laws of God. Can you see? And great is the law. Great is the law. Great is the law. Because, well, the good will trump. That is interesting. So it's more or less the most important ideas of natural law. At that time, nobody will call natural law. And don't you know, there are many historians that say that the Greeks who developed the idea of natural law, they just copied. They just, because you don't have only this at this time. 1,000 years later, it means in the year 1000 before Christ, there was another vizier, another minister, that also wrote some other maxims, and some of them similar. And in these kind of things, the same. There are two laws, justice will prevail. Many people say that will copy that. But what is interesting is that the tradition lasts at least 1,000 years. Some people dedicated to history will say the Greeks were able to develop natural law because they received it from Africa, specifically from Egypt. Can you see? They will put the name. Who will put the name? The Stoics. And the most important one, Cicero. He will develop a treatise about these kind of things. But it's interesting that you have, even before Cicero, before the Greeks, 2,000 years before, because the Stoics is about 3rd century before Christ. So 2,000 years before, at least in North Africa. What happened in the other part of Africa 4,000 years ago? We don't know. We don't have proof. No, we don't have evidence. But most likely, it could be a similar point of view. And for me, that could be interesting. No? For me, if you realize that is not that far from Ubuntu and from many other, Ubuntu also believe in another command that is not only of the human will. Well, we can talk about that later, but there are many similarities. Probably, I will say there was a kind of ancient tradition, very ancient tradition, that will take the form of Ubuntu in the south especially, and of natural law in the north. So that is very interesting because let me add something. Let me see. Yeah, there were many scholars at the beginning of this era, from the especially 3rd century to 7th century, that were natural lawyers in Africa. There was one that born in Africa, lived in Africa, and died in Africa, that was the most influential from Africa in the world. I mean, in Europe, and later by Europe in the world, who shaped the Western ideas of natural law. That was Augustine of Hippo. There were many others, and the article you will see from here, Cartago, TVs, TVs no, Cartago, Tunisia, Alexandria, Libya, yeah. From Morocco also there was Averroes, that is a Muslim natural lawyer. So from all these countries, you have incredible people in the first millennium, in the first 1,000 years, that will be very influential in the Western world, very influential, especially one, this one. But all of them will be very influential. That is the thing. I think that not many people realize that Africa was so influential in the Western ideas. So that is interesting to remember. And today, I mentioned that article. There are many other natural lawyers also here in Kenya, in Nigeria. You have an incredible guys there. Also in Cote d'Ivoire, in English is, well, I don't know. Well, in many of these countries of West Africa. So my idea is that you have also, by the way, natural lawyers very famous in America, African Americans, by the way. The most important one is Martin Luther King, very influential, shaping precisely the Western understanding of the law. So I wanted to highlight this kind of thing because I think that's important, and not just to believe that Africa was created 3 centuries ago. No, Africa is the older than Europe. I did exactly the same research with the most influential articles of natural law with more citations. And I found this. This is the 100 most repeated words in these papers of natural law. This is the literature that I found today. So this is, you can see, the most important word here is not Africa, obviously, which is law. Can you see? And obviously after that natural law, because it's when I did the research. Ubuntu, the second one was Ubuntu, the first one was Africa, incredible. Huh? And here is law, the first one, and the second natural law. Then, that is very interesting, right? There was one author, John Finnis, who said the new terminology to talk about natural law is rights, human rights. And you can see human rights, but rights. That is interesting. Morality is so important here. You said yesterday, no? We saw that during our course, no? Natural law sometimes, most of the time, includes some moral arguments in the argument of law. So you can see principles, idea, theory, human being. That is very interesting. Indeed, natural law is a very old tradition. It began exactly like Ubuntu, and it began in the north of Africa, according to what we know. I mean, this is interesting, because we don't have evidence what was happening 3, 4, 2,000 years ago in some places of Africa. But in the north, we know, we have many documents. And there in the north was clear that people believed that there was a law, a command from God, and you should do that, and in the long run, it will prevail. So you have a comparison here. Can you see? Now let's take care of the coincidences and later of the differences. That will be an interesting exercise of the two traditions, the two African traditions, according to what I understand, the sources that I have, and I will provide the article that is just a draft now, so you can check. Okay, so let's begin with the coincidences. First, we have both a normative argumentation that is clear. Law, yeah, can you see? And also the Constitution. The Constitution is very important, especially here in Africa, more than in natural law. Because, well, could be many things, But one of the way of promoting African philosophy now is by including these values in the African constitutions. And that's why in the literature you have tons of mentions of the Constitution. Can you see? Even more than in natural law. The legal also, we have in natural law, they differentiate law norms, legislature laws, legislation, statute. Yeah, so they use many words, but more or less for you use less, but more or less you are talking about the same things. The number, the comparison, you will see the article, the proportion between one of them. That is it. Courts also, that is interesting. No? Also, both you relate cases to courts. More here in Africa, we talk about courts, cases. Yes, it's courts, but it's and cases is there, but not with so many repetitions. By the way, I understand that you understand this kind of graphics. The bigger the word, the more the repetitions, okay? So second, there is a rational moral argumentation, and that is very clear here. You also use values. Values is so important here, even more than in natural law, values. But theories, reason, morality, ethics, philosophy, principles, yeah, that is important in Ubuntu literature. As I told you, is the most shared philosophy probably in Africa. In natural law, you have this, no? The same principle theory and these kind of things. Justice, the mention of justice in Ubuntu literature is more or less the same here. It's the same word, by the way, but here you add the goods, for example, the means, the intentions, trust. Trust is interesting. Trust matters in natural law a lot. No? Natural, the relation to natural. So the theoretical argumentation related to morality. What is just? What is worthy? Morality is mentioned here. And yeah, so you can find also morality in both places, but morality is stressed in natural law, as you can see. Both places you use, but is more present here, I will say, in both places. Yeah. So let's see another thing that could be interesting, the cultural concern. The cultural concern. So traditions and faith. Traditions, faith, and we can add many other things, no? South, Roman, Western. There are another thing that sometimes it is mentioned is the Dutch and Roman tradition that matters also, just to as a contrast what you are, what you're not. So in any case, as I told you, traditions, meanings, and these kind of things also appears here in this paper, but in another proportion, no? It's less, I will say. Instead, I will say history appears in the 100 words of natural law and not in Africa. It's more than tradition, they see the history, but both. It's not that it's not present, it's just a matter of proportion. The human foundation, this is very important because that is the essence of Ubuntu. What is the person? Person is, well, what you are with your community. Yeah. And also here is stressed, no? The person less, but is stressed also. And I will say here in Africa, the idea of respect and dignity, as I told you, dignity doesn't appear in the 100 words of natural law. That is very, very interesting. That is very interesting because it's true, the thing that you heard yesterday in class. Now, that really matters in the African approach. Instead, in natural law, obviously, it is mentioned dignity, but it's not in the 100 most repeated words in the literature. Can you see? That is the idea. The individual, you use more the word, the individual, than natural law papers. Perhaps to contrast with the community, as we will see. Society, people's state, social, also here. So is the individual as a member, as a part, yeah, in harmony. That is interesting. This word harmony. Harmony. That is interesting. I will say something more later. Here is also the state, the nation. You can see community also is here, but the proportion between community and the use in Ubuntu is 10.33 times more in Ubuntu literature than in natural law. Community also matters a lot. No? And the rights approach, the same thing that I told you, no? Is more than the same proportion on both sides. Okay. Freedoms the same. Okay. We'll say. So the first conclusion here is this one. That exact coincidence, or perhaps many times is the same idea of freedom or liberty. Can you see? This is same notion, different words, or same word, or same root word. So the coincidence is incredible. 73% of the things that each one is talking about, the authors focus on, are the same. Can you see? 73% of the things. Yeah, so that's why I tend to believe that these two traditions from the north of Africa, from the south, probably they had a common root, because both things, on one hand, most of the things are the same, and the arguments are very similar. And on the other hand, there is no contradiction. There is no contradiction. So probably it has both the same foundation, historical foundation. So let's now we saw these exact coincidences of this size. Now you can appreciate better. No? So the remaining 27% is nothing. No? The remaining, well, the same notion, 9%, is almost nothing. I mean, these words that you can see here. This is the 9%, not the most important words. Can you see? Legal. Yeah, this is. What is that? Congress. Yeah. Legislature. So these are the words, to be more exact. No? You can say, yeah, autonomy, sovereignty, conflict, case, claims, faith, religious beliefs. Yeah, you can match politics, political provisions, statutes. So you can match more or less. It's not the same word, but it is a similar notion, not the same notion, probably. That is the idea. So what is interesting now is the last part. The difference. What is the difference? Well, I already mentioned something about natural law. So let's see now the difference in Ubuntu literature, academic literature, legal academic literature. So, as I told you, Met and Yeah, the Nobel Prize that she won in South Africa for promoting precisely Ubuntu. That is interesting to know, no? And Tadeusz Metz, probably, I think that is the most cited philosopher nowadays in Africa. And here you have different authors, no? We already mentioned all of them. So that is a clear difference. The most important people on one side and on the other. No? Let's see here. Well, in the natural law, it is stressed. This 27% of difference. Now, what is just here? What is unique in natural law that is not in the other list? Positivism. All the discussion against positivism. No? Say no, it's not just the positive, the law approved by the legislator. There is something more. There is something more to be the law from God or the law related to one kind of ethics, secular natural law. Yeah, in Africa, the secular natural law is not so present. More this link with God, the idea of power. Yeah, they stress no the idea. No, what is happening if the law is against morality, against of the powers of the human being, against the natural law, the divine law. So what we will do with the government? Well, who has the right? So there is a kind of distinction to show what you have to do. Well, if you have to obey the law or not, which law? No, they will say one is just force. One is just force, and you have the right to self-defend yourself. Can you say self-defense is there? Yeah, because otherwise it will be just the use of force, and you have to obey Hitler and the worst people ever if they are the authority. Okay, I mean from the point of view of validity. The facts, you have also the word the facts. In the facts can happen whatever you want, but obviously you are not required to torture your friend or your mother. No, that is never the law, not in any system. No? That is the typical approach. One of the things that they start also, well, the idea of property and copyright. There are many papers about the right to property and copyright, and that is understandable many times because it was developed also in the last literature when there was an issue about property. Does anyone have the property of everyone, communism or not? I will say that more or less the same topic is in Ubuntu literature, but not with property and copyright, but with the access to land. That is an issue. Access, land, business contracts are more the topics of interest in Ubuntu about property. So that is interesting. Economic is in both sides, by the way. The interest, purpose, and aims. No? That is very interesting. That is very interesting. Interest. Yeah, because in these 2000 years, what is really interesting in natural law? The methodology. The methodology is more or less like the methodology that I explained this first class. Let's see what first, understand the human being or your computer or whatever you want in such a way you can understand what are things for or what the humankind or the human being is for. the possibilities and the highest possible happiness and what it means human flourishing. So the next thing after understanding the essence of things and human beings is, well, what is the aim, the ultimate aim, the means and a meaningful life, and what is the purpose of everything. Can you see? So that methodology is very interesting. That is very peculiar in natural law. More than positive law, there is almost nothing. I mean, it's just a mention of consequences. So that is interesting. Okay, we have here means, intention, purpose, duties, interest, all the things that I mentioned. So you can see that that is a topic in natural law literature. Okay, so let's see now the other side, the side of Ubuntu articles. In these articles, first, identity. Identity matters a lot. And indeed, the most repeated words were Africa, and the second one, Ubuntu, no? Obviously, the fourth one is South, after law. But there is also culture, Roman Western, and things, no? That gives you an idea of what it's about. When they say these articles, Western is to put a distinction, no? That is one thing that is interesting. Identity. The identity matters a lot. Some of you have the right of identity for your essay, so that is interesting. What is your identity? We are discovering always, everyone in the world, what is our identity over time. Second, the communitarian approach. So you can see here in big the word community. Is also in the natural law papers, but here is 10.33 times more used the word than in natural law articles. So that is very interesting, I would say. Why? Because you realize, yeah, Ubuntu, no, is I am because you are, and you are because I am. One of the ways of saying the same phrase. There are tons of ways of saying the same idea. Yeah, but that is very interesting. Obviously, there is a mention of groups, part also, member, they also who use. That is very interesting. That is very interesting. Because, well, is how to create something. You know that the Human Declaration of Africa is the human rights of the peoples. Yeah, it's a communitarian approach. You already mentioned yesterday, perhaps you will see the other part of the class tomorrow, that also matters a lot in the African philosophy. Everyone, every kind of philosophy that you find in other tribes, not just in these ones, are a communitarian approach. Yeah, that is interesting. Society matters also, the social aspect of everything, and dignity. So dignity, respect, and these kind of things. Thus, it happens, yeah, to some extent. Obviously, every continent will have their faults, yeah, but yeah, this in the literature is very present. Yeah, and then the last thing is the restorative approach. The restorative approach that is interesting. You have restorative, reconciliation, transformative. Not so many times mentioned. Harmony is there. Can you see harmony? Also is here. So what it means, restorative approach? Probably you have seen in some classes that, but in the literature, the phrases that I found most repeated is the restoration of the harmony in community. So that is interesting. What kind of restoration? There could be many ways of reconciliation or repair or compensate. That will be more or less the tort law approach. No? You hammer me, you pay. Yeah, so that is not the idea here, at least in the paper that I have read. The idea is a bit deeper. Probably you have to do that, but mainly is to reconcile and to restore the individual into the community, to restore the harmony that is very used in these phrases, no? The communitarian harmony. Yes, so that is interesting. No, it's a kind of balance that exists because you are there and you exist with the community that you have to restore. And that's why also there are many papers related to criminal. And you see it here in big criminal. That was not in natural law. How to, in criminal cases, how to restore the peace of the community. That is another value that appears here. No? Peace. I'm not pretty sure it doesn't have the 100 words, and that's why you cannot see. Health is also here. No? As you can see, land is also an issue here, not that big like property. Yeah, I will say that is fantastic because well, culture, criminal, as I told you, victims, offenders, these two words that didn't exist in the previous list. Victim and offenders. Well, there is a sense of victimism that is interesting. How many, as I told you? Well, so other local topics, development, equality, children, life, health, land, capacity are very specific from Africa that are not in the other place. So it is quite interesting here to realize, well, the great conclusion, no? That more than 70% of the things we share here, I mean, the two traditions. Yeah, there are some specificities, some particularities in both sides, 27%, that are not in any kind of opposition. And even some of them very similar, no? Some of them will be more focused on property and copyright, another in land, and the access to land, business. No? That is interesting, no? It's very interesting to learn what we can take advantage of the other, no? I mean, for me, it's a mutual benefit relationship. For natural law, I think that is so important today for natural lawyers to understand better what is the person and to see what will be the communitarian approach, no? That is not just, society is not just a contract, it's not just a pact, it's something deeper. Yeah, that I think that is the great contribution of African philosophy to the world, must be. Yeah, on the other hand, African philosophy can learn also something from natural law. It's a long-standing tradition, more than 2,000 years. So, but it means that it's good to see how we can develop. And as I told you, probably the most important contribution of natural law is not just the distinction between these two laws that you have also in African philosophy, as many authors say, but also the technique, no? How to include the goal-oriented technique, no? That you see the aim, the purpose, what is meaningful here, how to promote that. That is really interesting to understand well and to apply, no? To apply for the sake of the human being and their community, both, no? So you can merge both traditions in the center of Africa, precisely. That one that came from the north, second from the south. Well, in the center, Kenya should be the synthesis of this mutual benefit relationship.